Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. We are EBS, your trusted technology partner for over 43 years. We specialise in the deployment of Sage Business Management and Microsoft solutions, managed services and secure on-premises and cloud-based infrastructure. My name is Darren Tolley and I am one of the account managers here at EBS. Today we are joined by Sicon, who we've partnered with for many years. Sicon provide innovative solutions which enhance Sage 200, covering a wide range of business needs. Steve Gemot, Sicon Sales Manager, will demonstrate how Sicon Barcoding and warehousing helps companies significantly improve warehouse operations, increase efficiency, and enhance customer service and satisfaction. We are recording today's presentation and will make this available to you in the next few days. Just a note really that we already have lots of recordings on our YouTube channel, which when we send the videos out to you, you'll see the links to that. Remember to hit subscribe to receive notifications when we load up new videos, which we do quite regularly. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat, or there will be an opportunity at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. Without further ado, I'll pass you over to Steve. Morning, Steve.
Morning, Darren. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. I will turn my camera off in just a second, as otherwise I've got my screen over here, and all you're going to see is the side of my face. But let's just check, Darren, first that the technology is working, and make sure that you guys can see my screen, and then more importantly, you can see the Sicon website.
Yeah, that's all good.
Perfect. So, in terms of today's session, bit of a structure. Give a very brief overview of who Sicon are, how we fit with Sage and the EBS ecosystem, and then we'll talk a bit about the setup, the back end of the barcode, and what it is that we've done. But the bulk of the time we'll spend actually in the product, receiving purchase orders as we go. As Darren said, there is the chat, so use the if you've got any questions as we go, or alternatively we can leave those to the end. Now, you may or may not be aware of who Sicon are, but just as a brief introduction, we're classified by Sage, you can just see in the top right hand corner here, as a tech partner plus. Essentially, we're a developer partner at Sage, something we've been involved with for in excess of 20 years, and we're accredited therefore by Sage to create add-ons for Sage 200, and at the moment we only develop for Sage 200. So this list of products that we've got here, all of these are designed to work either inside or around Sage 200 to give you that seamless experience. And often our barcoding is slightly different because we've got the app, obviously, which sits outside of Sage, but often what I'll say is you will not know where Sage stops, Sicon starts, or vice versa. So that's very much our USP. We don't sell direct, we sell through Sage's partner community with Darren and the team at EBS, as Darren said earlier, being a long-standing key strategic partner of Sicon's now. What that means from your perspective is you've got that triangle of a sales, EBS, your sales, then underpinned by Sage. Last thing, we don't write bespoke. Sage 200 is in what I classify as the off-the-shelf arena. We're the same. So whilst it's highly configurable, it is within the design framework, but the products do move forwards with a couple of releases a year containing features that customers have asked for. So I'm not going to guarantee every idea you come up with would make the roadmap. As I said, I don't control that, and we don't do bespoke. But what I will always guarantee is we will listen to those ideas, and that's essentially the right way, in my view, to develop. So what we're going to focus on today is the barcoding and warehousing solution. So probably important just to start with what have we done, what is it and what is it not. So rather than have a separate database and synchronize, have our own stock and control it that way, we actually use the Sage database. So you've got one version of Sage stock. We use Sage purchase orders, sales orders, stock moving. So all the transactional elements, we're essentially mirroring what Sage does. So instead, we've got our add-on, which you store inside of Sage, which has some tweaks, and again, we'll run through some of those. We then got an Android app, which runs on an Android barcoding device, which is connected to Sage via our web API. Now, I'm actually connected. I'm in the office today, but my device is connected to our guest Wi-Fi, which will go over the internet to talk to the server wherever this is that you can see today. So I'm not actually in the same vicinity. So just to reiterate, what you need: a supported version of Sage 200, our add-on installed, the API configured. We always recommend sitting it behind an SSL certificate, obviously just to further secure the connection. You need our app installed on barcoding device, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And then you need users and just a wireless network to cover. So very quick and simple to set up. In terms of devices, probably we'll talk a little bit later about hardware, but we don't get involved in the hardware. There's a multitude of options that you can use. Simplest solution, probably the cheapest, is something like a Samsung A6 or A7 tablet and a separate Bluetooth hand scanner. Benefit of that, with a tub case, sub £200 for that combination. Downside is, of course, you're charging two devices. The device I've got today is from a company called JM Prime, who've been fantastic to work with. We don't get any kickback, but yeah, just you obviously want a device to recommend. This one's running, I think, Android 11. Again, I'll show you that if we get a chance a little bit later on the session where you can find that. But we've got clients using Zebra devices or Honeywell devices for printing labels. I might as well cover that bit off as well. We actually use Sage Report Writer for the labels, but they're designed for Zebra printers, with Zebra being the market leader. Okay, so that's enough waffle from there. What have we got on screen? So on the right hand side, I'm using TeamViewer to share the screen of my device. So as we go through, you'll be able to see as I change and scan different items. I've got my barcode sheet with some barcodes on it as well, so I'll be able to scan. I don't know whether this microphone you'll pick up the ping or the beep, but yeah, I'll be obviously doing a mixture of ways of that you can utilize the device. And then in the background we've got Sage. Now I've got every single Sicon add-on installed, so my menu is far busier than yours would be. But where we're going to start is the in the barcoding warehousing folder. So as you can see, it just sits inside of Sage. Actually, just before that, I'm going to go into standard Sage stock and just touch on a couple of areas that we're going to utilize. Now, for those who've perhaps sat through demonstration of ours, we're always using our good old espresso machines. But as you can see, this is Sage's standard stock record. Now, we have made some tweaks to this, and I will touch on those. First thing to note is down here, we actually use Sage's barcode field. And it really depends on the way that you will be operating. So what I mean by that is, if we've got some clients where they signed up with GS1, so they've got their own unique barcode, in which case you would populate those. We can import them in against your stock items. And if we print a label or you've got the label on there, then the system's going to recognize that. If, however, the barcodes that you might print and you're going to stick on the items are going to remain within your organization. And what I mean by that is nobody externally is going to scan them. But rather than make up barcodes, we've got some customers where we just simply convert the stock item code to a barcode, and then yeah, you've got something that the system can recognize. In terms of locations, slight tweak to the view. Yours won't look exactly like this in your Sage system. So I've got multiple warehouse locations. The way we work is your users, you can give them access to multiple locations, but they will need to log into the warehouse that they're going to work with. This reduces errors of mispicks, and they'll only then see the transactions on purchase orders for that particular warehouse, for example. Now, below that, within the warehouse, we then hook into Sage bins. Now, you may or may not be aware, but actually a standard Sage has 9 bin definitions. And all it does is, from an allocation perspective, it goes 1, then 2, then 3. We've hijacked that. So we actually use bin definition 2 for your pick face. So that's your low hanging fruit, 3 for overflow, 9 for bulk storage. But you can see we use some others. But actually what we're able to do is, for example, if I pick this one here, click on edit, we've then tweaked it so you can drill down further. You can set against the bins, and if you're not using bins already, I'm going to move to another area shortly within our menu structure where we can import those in. Or if you've already got your bins in Sage, well, we can print labels for those if you wanted them to. Even down to, we can set minimum maximum reorder. We've got a replenishment option, so if you want to run a replenishment routine to take items from bulk and then move them to the pick face. Suppliers, again, standard Sage supplier, but we do store or can store barcodes. So if your suppliers have barcodes on the items, then we can store them against the record so the system recognizes them, but you don't have to front load it. I think that's always quite key. If there's an item, so if you're receiving a PO and you scan a barcode and the system doesn't recognize it, you simply tell it which stock item that is, and when the goods receive, it will populate that there ready for next time. So again, I'm not going to go through every detail, but these are just some of the tweaks that we've done to standard Sage. Lastly, you will have a Sicon tab with a barcoding record on there, just things that we can then standardize. So for example, do we want to automate and say as standard, we will print labels on goods receipt. So rather than the user, as you'll see later, selecting it, it's going to automatically select, and things around creating pallets. But again, we'll talk about those where relevant. I'm going to jump up into the barcoding warehousing folder and just want to jump down to maintain locations. So this is where, if you aren't currently using bins, or even if you are, and sometimes it's a great opportunity just to revisit that. You know, how do you want to lay your warehouse out? We've got some where they've got racking, so they label it up similar to, say, IKEA. We've got others where, because of the size of the items, they just break it down and go, well, that's area A, that's area B, area C. So they've got bin A, bin B, bin C. And it's, for me, it's beneficial because, especially if I'm picking for a works order or for a sales order, sorry, for a Sicon works order, I should point out, but for a sales order, it's going to guide the user to where in the warehouse that stock should be. Now, as I said, we can import those. We can also print labels, but this screen also has further use. If you're picking for a sales order, for example, you don't want your operative to be picking first item at the very left extreme of the warehouse, the second item at the very right extreme of the warehouse, and then back to the middle. You want them to pick in the most optimal route. So what we can do is we can sort this. So perhaps they go up aisle 1 and down, or they might zigzag up. So again, it's just about optimizing that. And we've got a client where theirs is actually for 3 floors. So, and they've got a little helter-skelter thing that goes down. They put the boxes down. So again, that order, just the items at the top, they pick the top floor, it goes down to the middle floor, and then down to the bottom floor. Lastly, and I won't spend too much time in here, whole array of settings. We've kept it very simple. You get a brand new device. All you simply do is scan this QR code. It'll take you to our app center where you can download the app. Once you've downloaded the app, then you can either scan the QR code, or if you click on print, there's a QR code with a unique URL and the company ID. And all you do is, on the device, you click on server, either scan the QR code or enter the details, and you're connected. That device is now connected, and any user who has access to that Sage company then can just pick up the device and start working. From a user perspective, I'm a user called Steve today, so they are named users. Now, you could, if you wanted to, just go for user 1, user 2, user 3, and you pick up whichever device. Benefit of that is, of course, less users. The downside is, as you'll see a little bit later, we've got no audit trail in terms of who's moved stock or who's done a dispatch or a receipt. So certainly a lot of our clients will have unique names, and just enabling the user gives them access. And then we've got the features that that user has permission to access. Again, this is so simple. It might be my first couple of days, you just give me access to receive purchase orders, just untick everything else, and I'll only have the relevant options on my device. I prove myself and you turn on a couple of other settings. I simply log out, log back in, or just refresh the data, and I've now got some extra options. So again, it's just about keeping things simple. So these ones are standard sort of core Sage elements. So you probably wouldn't want me to randomly add or write stock off, so you just turn those off. The extensions depend on other Sicon modules. So as we mentioned, it does work with Sicon work order processing and Sicon kitting as well. So again, they'll be there where relevant. We've got other options as well, things like I'm not allowed to over receive a PO today. So if there were extra items, I'd leave that line alone, receive the rest of the order, and I'd speak to Darren as my supervisor, who would have permission, would check the count and then over receipt, even down to, am I allowed to pick, but I'm not allowed to dispatch, that sort of thing. Warehouses, as I mentioned here, so if my user can access 2 warehouses, but again, especially if you've got multiple physical locations, it might just be relevant that I only ever work in warehouse A, or perhaps as a supervisor, I float across all of them, so you give me access to them all. And then lastly, the default printers for printing labels, dispatch notes. What you don't want are my dispatch notes coming out of a warehouse that's 30 miles away. The rest of it, you can see there's lots and lots of settings. I'm not going to go through all of these, but even down to how do we want to enforce the users. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with purchasing. So I'm going to put on a purchase order and standard Sage PO. There are a couple of other Sicon add-ons here, but obviously anything that's barcoding related, I'll point to just assume the rest is just standard Sage as I go through it. So we'll go for Chrome decor today. We want the items in tomorrow. And what we'll do is we'll just add a couple of items on there. We will bring in my good old espresso machine, or that pop-up. I'm going to bring it into the warehouse. So we'll just bring, actually, no, we'll bring 5 of those in. So we've got that there. Bring some cups in. So just 10 cups. And then lastly, for those of you who use Sage's batch or serial traceable items, again, we just interact exactly the same as where Sage. So if stock items batch traceable, well, then the system's going to ask you for that. So I'm just going to add in one of my dishwashers here, which is serial traceable, and I'm only going to receive one of those. And again, we can see how the system's going to handle that. So just a random PO with 3 lines on it. I'm going to save that, and Sage is going to give us our PO number 4123. Now, should be able to remember that, but there it is there. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to share the screen of the barcoding device. So all I do is I simply log in with my username and password. And what it's going to do is it's going to wake up the API. It's connected over the internet. It's recognized the connection. It's recognized me as a user and saying, yep, those credentials pass. I've got access to 2 warehouses. Which one am I working in today? Well, I'm going to work in the main warehouse. And then you can see there's all the options that I've got. Obviously, I've got everything switched on, or pretty much everything switched on. The menu will depend based on, as I said, the user settings earlier. So all I do is I receive my purchase orders. And at this point, I could scroll to the bottom. There it is, 4123. And I think this is the key point here. I don't have to synchronize. I don't have to dock it or anything like that. So long as my device can see the web API, the web API is running and the API can see Sage, then we're good to go. So it's live data all the time. We're not actually storing anything on the app itself on the device. It's refreshing live. And again, I'll talk about the benefit about that a little bit later. So I could scroll down, got some filters, or if I click in the search area at the top there, I could search for the PO number, or I could search for Chrome decor. So again, we've got those different options there. But as I go into the PO, that's now loading the outstanding lines as well. So if you've got a PO that's been part received, then of course we're only going to see the outstanding quantities. So there's my 5 espresso machines, 10 cups, and my single dishwasher. Now at this point, I've got a number of options. I can scan. I don't know if you can hear the beep there, but it's beeping. So there we go. Scan the barcode, and I don't have to do it in sequence. I could scan the espresso machine. I can click on the plus. And what you'll notice there is I can't click any further. And actually, if I scan that item, because I'm not allowed to ever receive, I get an error message saying that's not been found on this order. Alternatively, if I click in this area here, I can just enter the quantity. So we've actually got 3 clients who there's no barcodes on the items when they come. They're dealing with fence panels, sheets of steel, etc. But they still tap on the screen and then we'll print labels a little bit later because it's far more efficient, as you'll see as we go through. So lastly, I've got my dishwasher and I'm desperately looking to see if I've got anything with me today with a barcode on it that I haven't used previously. And yes, I do, hopefully. So we'll try that. So I'm going to scan my dishwasher. And because that's serial traceable, just as it would be if you were receiving this manually in Sage, we're going to need to enter the serial number. And if there's one on there that I can scan, then I could scan that. Doesn't like it. It's I'm just going to make one up. So we'll make up one called DT123. That'll do. There you go, DT123. And so long as at the bottom there's 1 and 1 serial number, that's fine. Now at this point, I've got this option here where if I swipe this across and click on there, I can actually print labels. It could be a single label or one label per item. Now I don't know if I've got my label printer up and running today. So it's a virtual one, but we'll soon. Yes, we have. So actually, if I come down here, this is just an example of the layout. And just to, in terms of the details, there's the barcode for the product code, and there's a barcode for the serial number. And I'm going to keep that up because I'll use that a little bit later when I put away. One question that does often come up is, well, we put the PO number on there. Well, yeah, you can. Obviously, it depends on the space for your particular label, but so long as the information is linked, then yeah, they're standard stage layouts that can be tweaked by Darren and the team at EBS or even yourselves. So there's the details. Just in the bottom left-hand corner of the camera, if you're using Sicon documents, then it's possible to take a photo and that will be stored within Sicon documents and staged against the goods receipt. We also, in this latest release, we added that to the dispatch as well, so you can take photos at dispatch, so of the box in the state it was when you packed it. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm receipt. You have to enter, we call it a GRN number, Sage calls it a document number. If I receive that in, I get my green bar. And if I just come back into Sage here and view this, again, no synchronization. It's that live link, as I keep referring to. There's the items now been received in. And if I drill down to deliveries, you can see received by Steve. So obviously that's the user I'm logged in as, the delivery numbers. And because it's a serial traceable, of course, we've got Sage's traceability as well. Now, what's actually happened in the background, it's all standard Sage. We're just facilitating that and making it easier for the warehouse to be able to move things around. If I look at the history, just in terms of the movements, we had 5 on a purchase order. They've been received and they're currently sat in a goods in bin. So I've set up in the system that all the items I'm receiving go into goods in, because the next stage is for me to put them away in the appropriate location. So if I go back to the handheld a second, I go back to my menu, next option I've got is to put away. And I will talk about pallets and that a little bit later. But oh, sorry, on boxes, I'm going to say none. Here's the individual items. So at this stage, I can scan my espresso machine. And what it will do is it will display the bins that we have set up against the stock item where we've stored stock. Again, one of the questions is, well, what if I don't want to put it there? Well, so long as the bin exists in Sage, i.e. it's in Sage as a location, I could say, well, I'm going to put it in BA01, and it will allow me to create that location against that stock item and put the stock away in that location. And of course, at the same time, is updating the stock record. At this point, I'm going to put it in AA01. So this is where you have labels on the bin locations, and I'm going to put all 5 away. And if I confirm the movement, that's then moved. If I just look at my stock history again, I can see if we pick up where a user called Steve has moved 5 from goods in to AA01. So we've always got that visibility there. Now, the thing you can't do in Sage, which we've got around, is you can't move allocated stock. And again, if you've tried to do that, you'll be aware that you have to unallocate, move the stock in Sage, and then reallocate. We've got around that. So again, this is another benefit of using this. So especially if that's a bit of a pain point for you, I'm just going to, on the device here, you can see where I've got free stock as well, but I'm going to, what have we got? Let's pick, let's pick one of these ones there. So BAL 1132. So let's just bring Sage back up a second, find that stock item, BAL 1132. So if we look at the stock itself, if I just go to the history, hopefully I can see that in there. Actually, there's no movements on that at the moment, but I do have some allocations. So if I bring up the device and I go, right, there's those 15, and I'm going to move. They're all currently in goods in, and I'm going to move these to. I'm going to move these at the moment to bin AA01. Hang on, wrong. I'm not going to do those ones. Those are batch numbers. Let me find a better example for you. Let me just move some stock. There is method in my madness, bear with me. The reason being is what I want to show you is some allocated stock that I'm going to move. So here we go. We've got 271 espresso cups, and I've got a number of allocations which we can show you here. Now, again, you wouldn't be able to do that in Sage. So what I'm going to do is for my espresso cups, I'm going to move 271. And I'm currently in bin AA0, and I'm going to move them all to DA01. If I confirm the movement, that's all moved. If I now show you the history, again, you can see all of the stocks moved. But if we have a look, there's all the allocation adjustments from bin AA01. And then as we've moved 271, it's now reallocated those quantities. So we're going to pick them from the correct bin. So it took a little bit of a while there. The reason I didn't pick the other one is it's batch or serial traceable. I'd have been here having to find batches, but hopefully get an idea again of the sort of movements we're doing. So the only difference with serial traceable, again, just on the put away, just to cover this one off, is if I scan my dishwasher, that's the blender, so I've got the barcodes too close together, that's better. Again, I can pick where I'm going to move it to. If I say I'm going to move one, I've got to tell it which serial number. Now, I've actually got it set up where I can select them on here without scanning. But if I've got this is why I have it laid out this way. If we've printed off a label or there is the batch on there or the serial on there with a barcode, I can actually just simply scan that. And so long as that unique serial number is in the goods in bin, I can move. And of course, now we've moved and that specific serial number is in another location. Now, I did briefly move around from pallets. So for those of you who do palletize your items, as you'll be aware, Sage doesn't have a concept to that unless you use units of measure, but then that gives you other challenges, of course, if you mix and match pallets. We've got these different, I suppose, container type elements, one of those being pallets. And what we can do is we can actually move items onto pallets, create pallets, and then you can move the pallet, you can print pallet labels off. You can put multiple different items onto a pallet and then move the pallet around. So again, we do have an option for that. I won't go through it today, but if that is something that's specific for yourselves and you like what you're seeing, get in touch with Darren, and of course we can then do a more detailed one on that particular area. Okay, so what other options have we got? I'm going to leave dispatch sales orders for a little bit. Inspect stock is an interesting one. Now, what we've done here is, for those of you who do need to inspect certain stock items, let me just minimize that. I think it's my kettle I've done this on. What we've added just down here when this loads up, we've got our own checkbox, which you can flag and say, is there an inspection required? You create an inspection bin and set that up. So you move the item to an inspection bin when it's received. It'll force you to do that. Now there's a setting where you can allocate to it, but you can't pick from an inspection bin, which makes sense. And then the inspection option allows us to pass or fail. If you pass, it moves straight back to the goods in to be able to put it away. If you fail it, then you'll configure what's your quarantine warehouse and the appropriate bin in there, and it will then move those items to that warehouse. So again, we've got that if that's relevant. If not, switch it off. We keep going down. A couple of options that I want to talk about. We saw the first one, which was the single item transfer. So moving the items around, simply follow the instructions. You go to the bin, as I said earlier, you might be pallets. You can see I've got different pallets in there, or it might just be I'm moving individual stock items. Again, we've got all those features. You select your stock items and the location you want to move it to. The second option, just above that, one at the top there is multi-item transfer. If you want to pick multiple items and move them to a bin, then you can do that as well. So you go around and pick all the items, move them to a single bin. The example would be, I don't know, if you're picking items because you can have a van turn up later to do that, although we've got a couple of other options for that. The two above it again, this is really where it's relevant for those of you who have separate physical locations where you need to load a van, for example, and then receive it the other end. So if they're physical locations but they're next door, there's this option which you probably use, or if it's within the same location. We've got one client where it's just a door, so it's the same building but just a door, and I'll show you that one in a moment. But if it is a separate physical, what we have within the menu over here, we have an option where it's called stock shortage transfers. Now what I can do is I can create a transfer, and what we're going to do is we're going to move it from this warehouse to our factory. I'll send the items today, give it a description if I want to. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to send some of my espresso machines. So we're going to send 100 of those. I'm going to allocate 100. Now what releases it is printing the pick list, and that will release it to the handheld. And so the idea here is to wait for the pick list to print. So again, it's a standard Sage layout, and if it does print it to screen, oh, there you go. Couldn't load the report, but the pick list does have a barcode on, so you can scan the pick list. Now, so what's happened there is that's actually released that to the handheld. So if I come down to the barcoding device again, I'm logged into the warehouse, so I can then see the dispatch. There it is there, number 85. So I go in, it's going to tell me where it's going. It tells me where in the warehouse to go. So I go to bin AA01. I'm going to pick 100. Now I do have a packing stage. I will talk a bit more about packing as an option. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to pack all those items for a moment. But I'll talk more about that when we get to the sales orders. It's something you can switch off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to recount it and say, yep, we're dispatching 100 of those. Now, this is an option where you could get a signature, something we've recently added in. So, you know, just at the dispatch, so the driver just signs to say that they've taken collection of it. But what we do is those items now move into in transit. So if we were to look at the stock history, you'd see it's that in transit. And your user then at the other end, so if I just change my warehouse and log into the other factory, when the items arrive, they can then receive the stock transfer. There it is, number 85. There's our 100 espresso machines. They can receive those in, and they'll now go into the goods in bin for them to put it away in that appropriate warehouse. So it's a way of being able to track it, but also have visibility whilst of what stock's in transit whilst it's being transferred across. Now, where we are, you know, that the example I said where there's a door just literally separating them, you could just use this warehouse transfer. So this is great. So I can click on plus. I simply go, okay, what bin am I going to go to? What stock am I going to take? So we'll take a couple of blenders. So confirm movement. So I'm going to pick a couple of blenders. Also transfer a few of those coffee machines back. And what I'm basically doing, if I go back, is I'm created a transfer, and there's a couple of items now. If I click on the warehouse, I have to have access to both warehouses. So I'm going to say I'm going to transfer them to this warehouse. At this point, I could pick the bin I'm going to transfer them to, but I'm literally just going to transfer all the stock, and I'm going to pick the bin that I'm going to transfer. I could have told it which bins I'm moving it, and actually that stock has now moved from one warehouse to the other. So let's just have a quick look at what that actually looks like in reality. The last time I'm going to come into the history, well, I won't promise, but I shouldn't need to come back into here. There's a load of movements that we've just done, but the last one is warehouse to warehouse. So you can see in terms of, there was the factory. So I moved 5 from the factory to the main warehouse as well. And then down here, that's where I did the in transit piece, just this bit down here that we saw earlier with transfer number 85. Okay, again, if not relevant, switch it off. Add stock, write stock off. Oh, so I'm not sharing the device. There we go. Add stock off, write stock off, pretty self-explanatory. And again, you probably we wouldn't give access. But if I find an item on the floor, probably my favorite area, if it's not too sad to have a favorite area of the system, and I'm just going to move back to my main warehouse for a moment, is the stock inquiry. And I love this because it's multi-use. So I find an item on the floor, I could scan the item and it will tell me where that item resides in the warehouse. And actually, if I scan the serial batch number, for example, if I scan that, it will tell me where that specific item should be located, so I could put it in the appropriate bin, or it'll tell me where batches are. But if I come back and I just scan that espresso machine, the other use would be perhaps I've walked past a bin and there's only one of that item left. So I scan the item and it'll tell me if we've got any in bulk. And actually, perhaps we haven't got any in bulk. I can keep swiping, it'll tell me if I've got any live purchase orders that we've yet to receive. In this instance, yeah, we have, so I'll just leave that alone. But if we didn't, well, of course, then I could speak to my supervisor or somebody in the back office because we need to order some more. I could scan a bin into an unofficial stock take. Talking about stock takes, then we've got two options for those. Now, again, lots of different options in terms of stock take that people go through. Some will do it once a year. In fact, we had a client where they would shut down for a week and a half a year, over 70,000 stock items, and an absolute pain for them. They implemented this. They weren't using bins, so everything sat in unspecified. They imported their bin locations and sorted them in the sequence, printed off labels, stuck them all around the racking, and then they just went through. I think they shut down on a Friday afternoon, worked till late, and then finished off Saturday morning. And they just moved all the stock from unspecified to the bin locations. So just went around scanning items, and they were then ready to go. And they now stock take weekly, so about half an hour or so on a whatever morning it is. They create a stock take, which I'll show you in a moment. They do the count, and then they're ready to pick for the rest of the day. So we do have two options in terms of the stock take. The first one is Sage's stock take. So if I come through, we manage this. I'm just going to delete that one, and we'll create another new one here. So I'm going to stock take my main warehouse. Could count bins, I could count stock items. So we'll call this Darren. That'll do. There you go, Darren. You've got one named after you. Obviously, if you've got product groups, so all standard Sage, and I'm just going to say we're going to count those two bins. Again, what releases it to the handheld is saving and printing Sage's report. And I wonder if I've got an issue with our report writer. We'll soon find out. That's, oh, there we go. That's printed. There you go. That has actually printed. So of course, lots of you will be recognizing this. You'll be printing this off, putting it on clipboards. People will be entering the quantities, and then you'll come back and update it. Now, what I'm going to try and do is position this so I can do this as quickly as possible. So providing, again, I've got access to stock take and I'm logged into that warehouse, it immediately appears. Now, a few things which are really important. The moment you create the stock take, just as it is at the moment, you need to count it. There's no point in time you do count it before anybody does any transactions. So in this instance, I'm going to go to bin AA01, and I'm going to just enter a couple of quantities. I'm going to scan my dishwasher, and I'm going to just scan my serial number there. So there is method in my madness. By the way, one thing I didn't touch on, stock transfer. Of course, we produce a dispatch note as well, which is really nice. So let's just bring this up on screen. Sage's managed stock take back up. There we go. And I'll bring up the device. That all seems easier than it is, but I'm going to just confirm my stock take, and I'm going to click on that as quickly as possible. So if I confirm the stock take, there you go, enter values. Those values are there immediately. So again, this is the first benefit. It is instant. As I said, I'm going over our guest Wi-Fi today, so this is as live as it could be. So there's the actual quantities. Now, a few things we've done within here. We can display the expected quantities and variances. So that's a pretty poor count. So we can do a recount on the handheld. But I also want to point out this. So again, For those of you using batch or serial traceability, one of the challenges you've got with stock take is it doesn't deal with batch or serial, so there's another process you have to go through. Well, we've got around that. So if I find my, where is it? There it is. If I find my dishwasher, we're looking for those items. This button here is our IP on there. And what you've got is what's the expected, or in this case, what's the unexpected. So we weren't expecting to find that one. In fact, we weren't expecting any. So, we might deal with that accordingly. But essentially, we can do our stock take with our serial numbers, and we'll do additions and write-offs accordingly when you complete the stock take. So that's option number one, still using standard Sage. Starts in Sage, comes out to the handheld, and then you confirm it in Sage. If you want something slightly more dynamic, then we do have a dynamic stock take. And the idea behind this is on the handheld, allowing your warehouse operatives the control. So the difference with this one is you still have to count it there and then when you create the stock take, but the moment I do the count, it's completed. So it starts on the handheld and just updates Sage. So you click on the plus, say you're going to count, say, a stock item, it's still going to guide you to the warehouse locations, or you could say I'm going to count a bin. And you go around, enter the items. With this one, you can display the anticipated quantities. So if that's something you want to do, I can add found items, but the moment I confirm it, it's done. So the idea here is we're going to do the stock take when we have time. So because I'm by a bin, I'm going to ring fence that bin and do the count there and then. But it's more agile. I don't know, my controlling side prefers the first option, where we check it before it updates. But actually, in a fluid warehouse where things are running smoothly, this option works perfectly for a number of our customers. Okay, conscious of time, so we'll jump straight to sales orders. Now, the other side of it, let's put on a sales order, and then we'll talk about that sort of process, and then we'll just touch on a couple of the other areas with other Sicon add-ons that we integrate with. So again, standard Sage sales order. There's going to be a couple of pop-ups I'll ask you to ignore, just their other Sicon add-ons, so they're not relevant. So go ASDA, ignore this pop-up, and the next one, as I said, not relevant. We're going to send it out today, and we'll add a couple of items on there. So that'll do. Get rid of 100 of those. Obviously, only allocated stock. As with Sage, can we dispatch? So I'm just going to do one line on there for a moment. Ignore this pop-up. So there. Now, just want to talk about this option up here, ready to pick. If your operation is akin to Amazon, where whether we send it out in one package or 20 separate deliveries, we don't care. It's get it out. If we've got stock, you get it out. Most customers, you want to speak to your client before incurring multiple delivery charges. That's where this ready to pick flag comes into effect. So until that's ticked, this is not going to be released to the handheld. Now, because I've got a setting on which automatically allocates if the whole order is fully allocated, as this one is, that's just going to tick for me. We can do it where by printing the pick list, perhaps down to the warehouse printer, that's going to be the trigger. So again, there's different ways around that, but that's the way that we can control it. We can do things like assign to specific pickers. There's lots of options around this, and again, it's one of those. It's a much lower detail sort of session that we would go through. But 5722 is our sales order. Now, if I just refresh this, there it is there, and that's ready for dispatch. So again, in the same guise as we've had before, I go to dispatch the sales order. I'm just going to scroll to the bottom, but again, I could find the appropriate order, and the one we're looking for, 5722, is the third one from the bottom because it's sorting it by the due date. As I click on it, we get the info tab, which you can switch off if you want to, but that's going to tell me who the customer is, what the delivery address, etc. And then we've got options. Now, I've got pick, pack, and dispatch switched on. You can turn off the pack stage and just have pick and dispatch. Again, depending on the type of organization you are, we've got some clients where the picker, the packer, and the dispatcher are the same person. We've got others where you've got a team of pickers and a team of packers. The pickers doing the picking, print the packing list, the packers do the packing and the dispatching. So again, we have got a variety of options. It's going to show me which bin to go to. So I go to bin there. I can enter the quantity that I'm going to pick. We do have the 3 dots on the left there, so I could report a problem, perhaps if there's not enough stock in there as well. If there isn't enough stock, I can also click here, and there's an option, I must have it switched off, to switch bins as well. At that point, I've picked the items. Now, when we get to the pack, this is where, and I'm not going to do this here, we can pick into boxes. I could pack into boxes. We've even got a scenario where you can pick into boxes and then pack onto a single pallet or onto a pallet. So we've got that sort of option there, but this is where we can select boxes, create labels for boxes if we want to, and then tell the system what items are in which box. I'm just going to skip that there. I could print my packing list, as I mentioned earlier. I could pack all the items. I could put them back. I'm just going to actually dispatch all of them. This is our Sicon courier integration piece, so I'm just going to skip that. Again, that's another module that we have that complements this. Would I like to dispatch? Yes, I would. And a few things are happening here. So first things first, look at my sales order. If I refresh, that's now dispatched, ready for invoicing. If I view the order, one thing I failed to do in here is actually it will tell you at the top at the time that it's being picked. You can restrict it so only one person can be in there. There's settings do we want to restrict whether they can make changes to an order that's in the picking stage. If you have the type of organization with very long pick lists, you could have multiple people in there. I start at the top and the bottom because it's live. We've also got this extra picked column. So for your for dashboards, we've got clients where the business partners built report. Corner in the screen says these are how many need to be picked, how many we've picked so far, and what's been dispatched. And because we also track the users, we can then have a league table of who's done the most picks, packs, and dispatches today. Because if I go to dispatches, again, we track who's there. And if I did put packaging, we'd see the details of the packaging as well. What's also happened is printed off dispatch note to my printer, ready for me to go, and it's done all of those bits. So just before I open up with sort of 6-7 minutes spare for any questions, Darren, just want to touch on a couple of the other areas that we've got on dispatching sales orders. We can do what we call a wave pick. So a wave pick is if you've got a lot of similar orders, rather than go off, pick order number 1, take it back to the pack bench, give it to Darren, go off, pick order number 2, so you're going to the same part of the warehouse, putting it down, etc. You can create a wave pick where it could be that you create it on the handheld by scanning barcodes that you put on the sales orders and go, right, go and pick these 10 sales orders, and I'll pick for all of those, put it into the packing area, and then we obviously pack each individual sales order. Something that we've got coming, we're just working and finishing it off at the moment, is for those of you who have multiple orders for the same delivery address that you want to pack perhaps into a single box. We can do a wave pick based on the delivery address, and then we can either pack them individually or pack them or collectively. So that is coming as well. Obviously, you can see there we deal with sales order returns. For those who are using other Sicon elements such as Sicon distribution, if you've got container management, then you can see the option here. We can, for purchase orders, we can receive a container in on the handheld. Obviously, only relevant if you've got that module. But keep going down. Works orders. So for those of you with Sicon works order processing, again, the same principle as sales orders where only allocated stock will appear. But what we can do is we can enable the user to find the works order. They can pick items, they can issue items, you can even book the works order. You can do a back flush on the handheld as well. For those of you with Sicon kitting, then again, when you create a kit and you allocate stock, we can build the kit, we can disassemble kits on here as well. We've even got a nifty feature where if you build the kit on the sales order, but just allocate the stock on the sales order, it will show all the individual kitted items they need to pick rather than the finished kit, so they can go around and pick all the individual items and then dispatch, and it does all the rest in the background. So lots of options, lots of functionality, still loads that I've not had time to cover today, but hopefully just before we open up to questions, you get the idea as to, first off, the implementation. We simplify that because we don't have to reset up stock. By using standard Sage functionality, that kind of mirrors all the movements you've got at the moment. Nice, easy to use interface, which I think you know, is great for your warehouse operatives. And again, we've got some nice elements which we've added, obviously, as customers have come to us with requirements which make your lives easier. But I guess, Darren, are there any questions?
You've probably covered most of them, to be honest, Steve. But so you mentioned about the devices,
Yep.
the JM Prime stuff. Basically, when we start a project with anyone that's taking on barcoding and warehousing, we'll work with them to identify what device is best to suit their needs.
Yes.
And we can actually also supply those. So that was one.
Yep.
Got another one.
Did you want me to just show where the JM Prime is so they can have a look at the sort of, or perhaps at the sort of devices that I'm using today?
You can do.
Yeah. So it's literally JM Prime. So these are the guys here. And if I go to it's this one here, it'll sort of move it. That's my old device. So 1D. So 1D is your traditional barcode, similar to what you saw earlier. 2D means it reads the square QR codes. But the device I've got today is this one here, a JMC2. So mine's running Android 11. I've got a removable battery. You can get trigger grips for it, he says. Not rendered very well on here. You can get multiple docking stations. Yeah, it's not liking that at all. But yeah, you can get trigger grips as well. They call it a pistol grip, battery chargers. What's nice about it's an all-in-one, but I think as Darren said, there's so many different options. Definitely engage with the guys at EBS. My recommendation would always be to get one for your project, see how you feel, and then obviously buy the relevant number once you're in your project. Sorry, Darren.
Yeah, sorry, that JMC2 is actually the most popular choice.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Around the stock taking side of things,
Yep.
so you went through the Sage 200 stock take. Do you have to use the Sage 200 stock take to actually do a stock take?
No, you've got the other one that I touched on was the Sicon dynamic stock take one. So you can use the dynamic stock take. So the difference being, and of course you use the relevant one. The difference just being, I guess, the levels of control. If you Sage's one, you know, it starts in the back office, comes out to the handheld, and then back office checks it before you process it through. The benefit of that is you've got those levels of control. The downside is you're adding that extra layer of admin and time before we can start picking for the rest of the day. The dynamic, as I said, starts on the, well, you can start it in the back office. You can do it pretty much on the handheld. You cordon off the area that you're going to count. You do your count, and then the moment you confirm it, that's it does all the adjustments. Then you know, your additions and write-offs. From the handheld, the benefit of that, very agile. The downside is, of course, that level of control. You need, you know, a lot of trust in the personal persons doing that count, because of course you haven't got that sense check. Now we do show you the stock take so you can check what they've counted and the discrepancies, but yeah, it's just a more agile approach.
Perfect. You did mention the integration to Courier. So if you're keying in, you know, you're having to rekey basically your dispatch details and consignment details into, I don't know, a FedEx portal or something, then Courier will integrate with the barcoding and enable you to automate that process basically.
So there's a list of it does, yeah. So it ties in nicely. There's different options. It's a separate module, separate demonstration actually, you know, through there. But you can see the couriers that we're currently supporting, and as we get more requests, then and customers on board, we're starting to add that. But certainly the mainstream UK ones, as you can see there, we support.
Yeah, there is a video on our YouTube channel basically covering off that. How long would it typically take to go live with the barcoding solution? I know that's a piece of string type question.
Yeah, it is funny. That was the first thought. I mean, there's so many factors that to take into consideration, the state of your current system. So, for example, if if your stock is already set up, you've got your bins already configured, you've got your layout and everything sort of sorted, that's going to be far quicker than your stock's in a bit of a mess, you need to consider how you're going to lay it out, import that. There's a lot of details you need to change, but I would say typically, I mean, it's a handful of days for consultancy. So that kind of gives you an idea, because we haven't got to reinvent the wheel. But I'd say a typical project from initial engagement through sort of testing and that, probably 3 months, something like that. You know, if it's a larger data set or lots of multiple locations, you know, it might be 3 to 6. But I mean, we've had some instances where we've literally gone in, we've installed it, and we're receiving a purchase order inside 30 minutes. Now, in that example, actually, you know, it's because it's live data. Theirs was a fairly simple setup. Now, the whole implementation wasn't 30 minutes, I should say. You know, that was, but just to prove a concept and that it was working, yeah, they received their first PO inside 30 minutes. But I'd say, yeah, you know, factor about sort of 3 months, because you've got your day job as well. You're going to want to test it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll always have a project kickoff meeting with again users taking on this solution. So as part of that kickoff process, we identify the key areas where you've got to do work and where we will do work and what training is required and so on and so forth. But yeah, I would agree. 3 to 6 months is probably a reasonable time frame.
The biggest thing to consider is the cultural change, and that's the bit that does take far longer, because you'll have, and you could probably, as I'm talking, think of these people in your house already. You'll have those who'll take to this like a duck to water. They'll absolutely love this. They've been asking for it for ages. And then you'll have those who go, well, what's wrong with the old way? And you'll have some who just don't care. And the hard part is there's a myth, I think, sometimes, that we drop the technology in and we're not going to have any mispicks. Stock's going to be 100% accurate in the areas, and because of the technology. Well, the technology is going to help, but because you've got humans involved, that's where you know, the issues are. So if we've had instances where person couldn't be bothered to walk to the other end of the warehouse to put the item away, so they obviously updated it on the hand towel, put it down to go to get their lunch, and then completely forgot about it. And of course, you're going to pick, and the system's telling you the stock's down one end, and they haven't put it there. Those are things we can't control. So that's where you need to work with your people. But over time, yeah, we've got lots of success with clients where, you know, one of them is a very large toy manufacturer who, with Black Friday, you know, the feedback from their operations director, I think it was, you know, they couldn't have done the record number of picks without the right technology, and that right technology being Sage and Sicon in that instance. But to get to there, of course, they've had to work with their people to make sure that they're doing it, and that's why the settings where you can switch on and switch off the functions, it's perfect. You know, rather than go big bang, we've got some clients just start and go, right, well, we'll just use it for receiving purchase orders at the very beginning, get people used to it, and then we'll start to release functionality. So lots of different ways. But, you know, Darren, you guys have been implementing this now for a long time. There's a lot of experience that you've got, and of course we've got as well, in terms of different ways to roll it out.
Absolutely. Well, that's really good. Thanks, Steve, for doing that, and thanks to everybody for attending today. We will put the recording of this up on our YouTube channel and send the links out to you as soon as that's done. Probably, I would think, a couple of days' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.